Aha! So, today's mix session is going to be a little strange. This is for a band called Chief of Seattle. I recently went back and remixed one of their tracks because I felt like it wasn't kind of very present. A lot of the mixing had been done with the band in the room, which sounds like a good idea, but kind of you get a bit of a design by committee thing going on. And having gone away and listened to it in isolation, it's not bad, but there were things that I wanted to change, so I kind of went through and changed what reverbs and delays I'd used, and chose different kind of EQ points for different things, different compressors. So what I'm going to do is quickly show you that mix, then show you a different song from the same session that I've stripped a lot of the plugins out that we weren't using, and I'm going to be using Reaper's new project tab feature to essentially kind of copy paste a lot of my settings that I got from the other song in the same session, and go from there and then use my ears to tweak accordingly. So let's see what happens. So if I click, let's just we'll work. This is Like Brothers, and this is the song where I changed the mix, and it sounds like something I like.
Did you ever look back to think what could have been? It's not the sky that we had, which we you did not see. So when the feeling's gone, but the pain is the same, you'll always know that they'll keep that flame for you. Like brothers, only know how to sleep.
Okay, so one of the main things that I like now that I wasn't using before is the reverbs and delays. It's big, spacey kind of sound. Now, The Earth Stood Still is the song we're going to be working on, and that's this one.
We all saw you coming.
So, slightly different kind of feel to this track. It's a slightly slower, slightly less kind of epic song, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy over the master bus settings and the reverbs and delays, and I'm going to go from there and see how close we can get, and then go from there. So let's have a look at the master channel, because there's quite a lot going on here, even though some are disabled. So I'm going to paste them in and show you quickly what they are. So there's the virtual bus compressor rack, which has quite a high threshold with the FG Mu doing its thing. Wave's Pultec EQ is really drawing out some of the top end, which makes the whole thing kind of a lot more lively and forward. But even though it says 4K, with it being a passive EQ, it's a very wide, very broad EQ that doesn't have a nasty spike or resonance in it, which is great for this. And then there's the virtual tape machine, which is kind of backed off so it doesn't redline. That would usually be going into Kazrog's K-Clip instead of Slate's FGX, which at the moment I'm using their K-Clip Pro. And I'm still using FGX for its wonderful meters. Some songs just seem sonically to fit K-Clip better than FGX, especially non-rock stuff. So far, what's that done to the sound?
We all saw you coming.
Okay, so that's really kind of thinned the mix out, which doesn't sound like it'd be a good thing, but when we really start to fatten up the bass and fatten up the drums, that will probably be quite a relief, because there's nothing on the master bus that actually takes out any bass. It's just enhancing a lot of top end and really saturating. So room 1, let's get that pasted in. That will probably, yeah, that's the that's the Bricasti room. The plate is an EMT 250 plate. That's my usual kind of big slow song and indie song kind of plate. A lot of engineers call it the R2D2 plate because it looks kind of like a small black and red R2D2. So the hall, because this song needed a hall reverb, is the Bricasti Medium Hall. Just makes, particularly for this band who are fans of bands like Lord Huron and that kind of big, epic indie thing, they needed a bigger sounding reverb to go with the big sound. And the delay that I'm using is a quarter ping pong, and that's a Roland Space Echo from Echo Boy by Sound Toys. And I think that Sound Toys are absolutely fantastic. Echo Boy Jr. is here. I'll get that another time. I don't need it right now because I've already set a setting up for this track. Now let's see how this sounds with those in.
I saw you coming.
Okay, so there's nothing going on the drums. They are currently quite flat and lifeless. Let's just compare. Oh, there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot going on the snare and toms. So let's start with the drums because they are the same drum kit. However, there's absolutely no plugins going on the drum. So on the drum overall bus, I'm using the Devil Lock Deluxe, which really brings the drum volume up and crushes everything, brings it out. Tape machine, my usual SSL style virtual mix rack, and then the transient controller plugins. It's part of Reaper's inbuiltness, but there are a lot of transient plugins out there, and this is just bringing out some hit and making everything stand out in the mix.
I saw you coming.
So suddenly that kick already is standing out. So what have I done for the kick here? Yeah, so I took away some of that top end punch, and again saturated with an API, took away some of that top end, and then my usual tape machine, so that can all go on the kick. Apologies if I'm flying through this, but it's 10 o'clock at night on a Saturday, and it's not exactly the most rock and roll thing. So the snare is going to be, what's in the mix rack? That's 50%, so parallel compression through the 1176 Modern. And that's just, it's probably not going to do much on this song because there's not much snare in this song. But to me that just gives the snare an extra kind of pop, an extra snap that helps it cut through a mix without having to be overbearingly loud. The toms are used quite a lot on this track, so let's see, there's the tape as per usual. Quite a good low end shove. Taking away some of that 400 Hz kind of mud. Apparently I've used a virtual mix bus rather than a console channel on the toms. Let's switch that out and get rid of that because the virtual console channel is probably what I should be using there. Get that copied for the toms, paste them in. What else have we got? Hats are in tape. Quite a lot of saturation, low cut, and not a lot else. So that's just a kind of a slight vintagizer, which I don't even know if this song, with it being quite an odd instrumentation that's full of percussion, I don't even know if there's any hi-hat in this at all. Ride mic, that's just the tape machine, so that can just copy the tape. The China channel, he didn't hit it, so it's not even being used. The virtual mix rack for the overheads is always interesting because I'm slamming the monster, taking some low end out, boosting the highs on the Neve, pushing a Neve mix bus, which is unusual, and giving it a little shimmer on the overheads, followed by a very deep 3.5K cut. This is just probably the wrong genre to use 3.5K in the overheads, so I sat them back again by doing that. And then let's have a look at the room. So that's the tape again. Slamming the monster again. Pushing some 4K out, probably. Oh yeah, that'll be right. I'll have wanted more 4K in the room, but to compensate, taking that over the overhead, out of the overhead. So I'm pushing the bigness in the kind of the high mid, kind of the size of the room by pushing the room mics rather than the overheads in that frequency area. Whereas if I'd wanted a kind of a sharper, more focused sound, I probably would have done the opposite and taken the 4K out of the room and added it to the overheads. So that's apart from the percussion channels, which I'll have to probably look at separately. Let's see where that's got us. Cool. That sounded nice and big. That's why there's no hi-hat in this track, because Sam, the drummer, is using a shaker in his left hand. So let's bring that up a bit. What? They sound quite different from each other. Let's just look at how hard he's hitting this kick drum. That sounds chimey. Right, the bass. Let's focus on the bass. Let's just get rid of the plugins that we have and move on. Look at the bass on here, because the bass is a Sans amp of mine, which I think I've changed that since. There's quite a lot going on here for the bass. I've really cranked the 1.6K to really bring a bit of definition out, because he was using a precision bass, and I wanted quite a bit more forwardness out of the bass than I thought I wanted in the original recording. So it turned out that kind of the character was lost in the overall mix. So, and is there any? Yes, there's a -5 on the room. So -5. Yeah, so it's -5, -15, and drop them on the bass. Right, so there's a lot more character in the bass now than there was, which is good. I'm quite happy about that. Now let's move past all the guitars, because they're kind of the whole body of the track really, and I'll take the keys down as well. Let's move straight onto the vocals, and then we can fit everything else around it and either copy and paste or just mix around it. So
Did you ever look back to think what could have been?
apart from the little radiator, let's just copy all this lot. So the vocals are at -3, -4.5, if you count the automation, and right, so yeah, we're talking -3. So let's get rid of. Turns out little radiator doesn't really work for this band, for this vocal, which is a bit of a shame. So I've got the VCC channel really quite pushing a Trident of all things. I must have just picked them until for Anne-Marie's voice, whichever suited, because she has quite kind of an upper mid peak when she starts really going for it, and it was really quite piercing with some of these console channels, but the Trident must be the one that I found that just absorbed that kind of high mid thing. So that's really pushing into an 1176, tickling the FG401 on circuit 2. I always use it on circuit 2 because it's the closest to an LA2A. So a trick that Stephen Slate mentioned is use the Monster, which absolutely kind of crushes and marmalizes a vocal, and use it about 5%. I think he said 2 to 5%, and 5 works for me. And then that just adds a little more life. So I'm really cranking the high end on this, taking away that 3.8, so that the high mid again, and bumping 700 Hz. So really putting some body back in the vocal. So let's just have a listen to just this vocal.
She gave you.
Hang on, before we do, let's just make sure that the vocal mix bus stuff is the same.
She gave you what you wished for now. Will the man you will come hunting?
That's another thing with Anne-Marie's voice. I've used a single tape slap, but from a memory, I think I just picked all the different tape styles until I found one that had some real character to the tape slap, some real kind of thick, saturated sound, just to really make it stand out.
You ran through the night, the stars lined the sky, and your heart it began jumping.
Let's just bring in these two vocals and see if they fit as they are.
You stood still when I saw you. Don't wanna die if it's not with you. Oh, stood still when I saw you. Don't wanna die if it's not with you. Oh.
See, her vocal sounds really, really saturated on its own. But if you listen to a mix like the first Killers album, Hot Fuss, you'll find that the whole indie vocal really is oversaturated. But in the mix, it suddenly kind of fits just right. And it's something that's quite bizarre, but it's really quite pleasing when you can play a mix back that's just saturated to death and everything's just nice.
You stood still when I saw you. I don't wanna die if it's not with you.
Right, so all the sends are pretty much the same. So what I tend to do if I'm working on a tracking session is we'll track all the songs in the same project, and I'll get the send levels into kind of a scratch reverb or scratch delay, just whatever inspires us on the day. But then generally those levels are kind of set. I mean, it's not set in stone, but what I tend to do then is change out or mess with the reverb itself rather than the levels, just to make the feel completely different without changing the percentages of each track that are being sent in proportion. Let's just say with it being Saturday night, I'm not sponsored by, John Smith's. Classy man drinks it straight out of the can. So that's how our vocals are pretty much going to be. Let's move on now. These keys, let's have a look, because these should be a background instrument.
The stars lined up. You stood still when I saw you. Don't wanna die if it's not with you.
Compress that to death, because there's some bits there that really I don't like.
Don't wanna die if it's not with you.
Let's just view this in a different way. View by piano roll. Is it pitch wheel? Yeah. So let's just get rid of all of that. Much nicer. That was just when you record into Contact, the keyboard that I have has aftertouch, and if you hold down the aftertouch, it can really start to slam the drawbar keys, which is a kind of cool effect when you want it, but quite often it's not something that I want, and it's a pain. So from here, let's just mute the acoustics, and then just
And your heart it began jumping.
in fact, let's do the same thing with the kind of lead acoustic, because there are 3 guitarists in this band, which is an interesting one to deal with. So there is kind of a rhythm acoustic, a lead acoustic, and a lead electric, but they don't. I'm not talking lead as in like. They can be quite ambient, and it can be quite interesting, but. Okay, so onto the electric, I think. See how kind of when the mix got thinner with the mix bus earlier? I'm just going to check right here, still on. Got thinner, but then as we've kind of warmed up things like the bass, suddenly the whole mix doesn't sound thin again anymore, but everything seems to kind of glue together. So let's look at the electric guitar. Now this is called Guitar Big. I might have to take the Echo Boy off this. Now let's just get rid of all the effects off the guitars, because the way that the guitars are in this track, it starts off as a mono guitar going through a group. And why would you put a mono guitar through a group? Well, later on in the song, it becomes a double-tracked guitar, and we just hard pan them left and right. So I may as well, thinking about it now, treat them the same by putting them through a stereo group and then using one set of effects, so that as I change the effects, it affects them both equally, and I don't have to forget and remember that everything's done twice. In a compressor, if I use one, which it seems I am doing, will affect them jointly, and will kind of stereo sum for the trigger, so that one side's not going to pump. So there's a little bit of a space echo going on here. It's another copy of Echo Boy. It's all running through a tape machine as per usual. Let's move these sends over to the group and get rid of them. There. Missing is the main acoustic guitar. So let's have a look at that. And if you look at the waveforms for these are actually stereo, but let's just hit save. These are just tracked with a spaced XY pair, and then one's been hard panned left and one's been hard panned right, just to take kind of the center out of the image and make sure that rather naturally they're given some space. That's one of the things that I definitely did wherever it is. Looking at it somewhere, yeah, there. 200, nearly 250 hertz low cut, so I'm really scooping the bottom out of these, because the lower end on the rhythm acoustics was really just drowning everything.
It's not when you are alone. The earth stood still.
Right, so the vocal group there's at 0. Vocal group here should be at 0 then. -3, -3.
The earth stood still when I sighed. Did you ever look back to think we could have? The earth stood still when I don't wanna die, and it's not when.
Seems if you got enough processing power now with Reaper, it will literally play 2 projects back at once. Wow.
The earth stood still when I sighed. I don't wanna die, and it's not when you are alone.
So the kick's supposed to be at -4.3. Thought it sounded a little quiet. Snare at -5.84. Toms at -8 because they get quite thumpy. Overhead at -4 and 2.9. -8 and -3.4.
The earth stood still when I sighed. I don't wanna die, and it's not when you are alone.
Alright, let's listen from the beginning now and see what we can see.
You woke one night alone by firelight. She had gone, and your heart it began jumping. With a heart so pure, she gave you what you wished for. Now, will the man you will come hunting?
Cool. Let's just have a look. The very first vocal part just seemed a little loud. So let's just add a little minus bit of a dB in there.
You walk. You walk one night alone by firelight, light she had gone, and your heart it began jumping with a heart so pure.
Cool, and that heartbeat thing that Sam wanted to be quite bassy, but it's not coming through. So let's make it more. Let's see, what have I done to it? Right, let's use quite a distinct EQ. Let's use the Ssl Eq. Maybe try and pull out a knocking kind of sound. And scoop out that sub. To separate it out of the headspace, try and make it kind of stand out a little. Let's try a little micro shift. That's better. It just puts a bit of a delay on both sides.
With a heart so pure, began jumping. With a heart so pure, she gave you what you wished for. Now, will the man you will come hunting?
Cool. I think that is us for the day. And yes, I know a lot of it was kind of, like I say, copy and paste, but hopefully some of the things I was talking about of why I'm using certain things has been of use to you, because it's been quite a productive session for me, even though very little creatively has gone on because I did all the creativity last time, but I probably spent 4 or 5 hours in the initial mix umming and ahhing and yesing and knowing and picking different EQs and deciding on different pieces before I was finally happy and settling with the right gear. So hopefully doing it this way has helped you see the result of it rather than the entire long drawn out grim process. So if you found any of this useful, hit the like button, it's really appreciated. Hopefully if you're interested in some of the videos, click on this one. This is the latest video that's come out. This one up here is the one that's best for viewer, whatever that means, and hit subscribe here. That's really appreciated as well, because every subscription helps me grow the channel. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.